Bruchim Abayim to another edition of our weekly shiur and Parashat with the Perusha of Zera Shimshon from Shimshon Nachmani, one of the Gedolei Italia in the time of HaRav Chaim Kadosh. We're studying Parashat Pekudei, and we're going to be reading together Ot Dalet, the fourth essay that he writes. Today's limud is dedicated Leilui Nishmat Dolat Bat Chorshid, that her neshama should have an aliyah. It's also dedicated for refuah shelema of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, for refuah shelema, and for the zchut of Zera Kayama, for all those who need it, especially for those who are very much involved anonymously with this shiur, and the breakfast and everything that comes with it, with the minyan. Should have a zchut of Zera Shel Kayama, Banim Tzadikim, Talmidei Chachamim, especially for Eldad Bad Mahnaz and Bracha Bad Marcel Dina, and all those who, quietly and anonymously support this endeavor of our weekly Parashat Shiur. Now, we're going to speak about, of course, the Mishkan. This is the fifth and final parasha that in Sefer Shemot has been dedicated to the building and assembly of the Mishkan. Merely 30%, maybe more than 30% of the entire Sefer Shemot, 5 of the parashiyot, 4.5 of the parashiyot of Sefer Shemot are dedicated to the building of the Mishkan. And of course, it begs the question of why would you spend so much time, especially because we recognize that Mishkan was a makeshift mikdash. It was not something that was supposed to stay on an eternal base. And he's not going to directly discuss this, but the question and answer of Zera Shimshon revolves around the importance of the Mishkan, because he brings a midrash in Yalkot Shimoni, in the Sefer of Melachim Aleph, Remes Kuf Pei Dalet, and the pasuk there that talks about Shlomo HaMelech completing the Binyan Bet HaMikdash. Of course, Shlomo HaMelech was a young boy. He was 12 years old when he took over after David HaMelech and the passing of David Melech Yisrael. And it says, "Ub'shnat ha'achad esrei be'erach bul," in the 11th year, in the 8th month, Yerach Bul, that's when the entire melacha of the Mikdash, of the Bet HaMikdash HaRishon, was completed. And you find in Melechet HaMishkan also that it was completed Bechavhei Bechislev. It was completed in 25th of the month of Kislev. But as we know, when was Mishkan erected and operational? Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Right? So you have months in between Kislev and Nisan, that the Mishkan is ready to be operational, ready to be erected, up and running, but we don't do it. They actually finished it pretty quickly, but it was not, for whatever reason, erected as he's going to now discuss. So says the Zera Shimshon, Amar Rabbi Chanina, this is what the Midrash says in Yalkut Shimoni, and Melachim, בח"ה בכסלו נגמרה מלאכת המשכן, והקדוש ברוך הוא חשב להקריב שמחת הקמת המשכן בחודש שנולד בו יצחק. Hashem waited until the birthday of Yitzchak Avinu, which is very strange. So why would you stay and wait? זריזים מקדימים למצוות. And if there is a mitzvah that is all-encompassing, is bringing the Hashrat Shechina v'Kadosh Baruch Hu among Am Yisrael, that's like the greatest mitzvah you could imagine. Why wouldn't you do it as soon as you can? Why in the world would you wait months until you bring about Hakamat HaMishkan? So says the Zera Shimshon, V'yesh lomar, he brings Rabbeinu Bechaye and Parashat Shemot, Perek Lamed Chet, in the Perusha of Rabbeinu Bechaye writes, in the name of Midrash, and this is really a Midrash Tanchuma, in our parasha, in Parashat Pekudei, Shmaaseh Mishkan haya shakul u'mchuban neged b'riyat ha'olam. Mishkan was a miniature universe. It wasn't just an edifice for bringing Shekhinah into our world, but it was building a miniature world that's going to be now controlled by the shefa that we create. This the Ramchal writes in many of his works. The most simple one, that's least Kabbalistic, perhaps, is the Derech Hashem in Chelek Dalet Perek Bet, I believe it is, that he writes that the way the world operates is not up-down, but down-up-down. We generate the shefa, we control the shefa from down below, and that moves things up above, which are the backdrop and the force behind things that happen down here. So we really generate the shefa up there, which in turn comes down, trickling down, and controlling every aspect of the creation and the reality of existence in this universe. And that, in the time of the Midbar, was done through the Mishkan. Mishkan was a miniature universe. Now, of course, we know, we are familiar with the Gemara, HaRotze lachkim yadrim, HaRotze lahashir yatzpin, that even directions in the in our tefillah towards the elements of Mishkan could affect our life. You want to become a chacham, you tilt yourself towards the menorah, which was the source of the spiritual energy of chokhmah in the world. You want to become rich, successful in finance, physical elements of your life, you turn towards the shulchan, which was the source of parnasan, shefa of the gashmiut in this world, and so on and so forth. So says the Midrash, Ma'aseh Mishkan haya shakul u'mchuban neged briyat ha'olam. But reactive, and in Rabbi Chaim actually has a long arichut, a very beautiful back and forth, which we're not going to have the time to go through all of it, but he goes element by element, comparing the Mishkan and the psukim that are said in Tanakh about the Mishkan, which corresponds exactly with the psukim and the elements of the creation of the world itself. So says Rabbi Chaim, Pasuk in Yeshaya Perek Mem Pasuk Chavbet says, "Hanotek kadok shamayim veimtachem keohel." The HaKadosh Baruch Hu spread the heavens and shamayim like an ohel, like a tent over the earth. And of course, the pasuk about the Mishkan says, "Masa Mishkan ktiva sitarir od izim leohel." So you see the comparison. He goes through each and every one of them, comparing the creation of the world and its elements with the elements that we have and we find in the Mishkan. Hikavu hamayim, kan ktiva stakyor nechoshed, sham ktiv meorot. Over here it says menorat hamaor. Every element of it is really corresponding with something in the creation. Ve'ofi ofef, and you have the kanafayim, of course, the kanafayim of the kruvim. Rabbi Chaim writes this at length, explaining every little detail. So you see that the Mishkan and its building and its existence really corresponded and really was related directly with the creation of the universe and its existence. And Rabbi Chaim writes elsewhere in Parashat Tetzaveh, he says that Avnei HaChoshen, the chest plate of Kohen Gadol, there are 12 stones, and the name of the Shvatim, every one of the stones has 6 letters on it. Right? He explains exactly how the names were divided. We generally speaking think it was Reuben, Shimon, Levi. It was not like that. Each one of them had exactly 6 letters. Says Rabbi Chaim. Take a look at Parashat Tetzaveh over there in Perek Chavchet of Shemot, Pasuk Tetvav. He explains the whole thing at length, and he says altogether are 72 letters that are mentioned on the chest plate of the Choshen HaMishpat of Kohen Gadol, and he says those are Keneged 72 Otiot Shel Shem HaGadol. Of course, that correlates with the Shem Ayin Bet that the Gemara in Sukkah discusses. Rashi in Masachet Sukkah explains this at length of how they have the 3 psukim, and each one of them has 72 letters inside, and the combination of those creates the Shem Ayin Bet. This is the greatest name, Shem Meforash, and so on and so forth. So you have that corresponding with the 72 letters on the chest plate of the Kohen Gadol. And with this, it's correlated to the fact that the world was created in 72 hours, says Rabbeinu Chaim, because it says, and this is clearly mentioned in Midrash, even though that he kind of like says it in a short way, but it's mentioned clearly in the Midrash that was 72 hours, and he says because Olam nivra bayom velo belayla. The world was created during the day of the 6 days, not during the night. As it says in Bereshit, Beyom aso Hashem Elokim eres v'shamayim, that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Beyom aso Hashem eres v'shamayim. Hashem created it during the day, right? So you have six times 12 hours of the daytime. That would be 72, right? So he writes. By the way, he actually says that I think, if you take a look at the actual language of Rabbi Chaim, which he does not bring here, so that's the deeper understanding of Olam Hesed Yibaneh, right? The world was built bechesed. What's Chesed Gimatria? Ayin Bet, 72. It says that's the 72 hours, and it's the 72 letters of the name. It corresponds with many other things as well. But here he is picking on only this was one element. But if it says if you pay attention, how many days it took, that was the creation of the world, 72 hours, the letters and all of that. How many days it took us to build the Mishkan? Have you ever thought about this? So explores Rabbeinu Shimshon Nachmani. It was exactly 72 days. And he does actually the math for us. He says, the reason it was not just arbitrary that it took 72 days was because it's corresponding with the Briat HaOlam. We are recreating a miniature universe that now is going to be governed with the combination of our actions and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, just like the Ramchal explains the Kiyum HaOlam, the existence, the continuous existence of the world is exactly the same way. So it says, the Zera Shimshon, if you pay attention, that also finishes on Kafhei Bekislev. When did Moshe Rabbeinu start the tzivui of building of the Mishkan? On the day that he came, after Yom Kippur, he came down from the mountain and he gave the tzivui of the Maseh Mishkan. Umiyom HaKippurim v'ad sof Tishrei yesh 20 yom. Right? That's 20 full days. Ve-29 shel Mar Cheshvan. The following month, Tishrei Cheshvan. So Tishrei is 20 days. Mar Cheshvan is 29 days. That's 49 days so far. Ve-25 shel Kislev plus 25 days from the upcoming month of Kislev. How much is that so far? 74 days. Right? So you say, oh, it doesn't match. But you missed a pasuk that says the first 2 days, there was no building, there was just collection. Babokir, the 2 days it took for Am Yisrael to bring all of the donations needed for the Mishkan, and the third day they started. So really, the actual Melechet HaMishkan took exactly 72 days. Those 2 days, initial 2 days, that are no building, it's just the collection. 2 days. And the rest of it will be 72 days exactly. He deals with the potential questions over here about Shabbat, and he says that those 72 days are corresponding with the building of the world. Now, you spend all this time to explain that our handmade of the Mishkan really is structure of the universe itself, with one difference, that now we became partners with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in building and maintenance of the universe itself. Even though that now it was completed the melacha, he brings the pasuk in Tehillim. Why was it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu waited until the birthday of Yitzchak? Why would you wait months at a time for putting up the Mishkan that was so quickly built and collected. Says the Zera Shimshon, Lefisha Mishkan Nikra Mishkan. He explained this before in previous weeks. He actually has an entire essay in the first piece in Parashat Pekudei as well, a long piece on this very thing. The Mishkan, Chazal tell us in the Midrash that was called Mishkan because, in Midrash Rabbah in Shemot, because it was a guarantor for our nation. Milashon Mashkon, right? When you give a guarantee for a loan, that's a mashkon. So Mishkan is from the language of mashkon, that was a guarantor for our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he explains. Ofidat Avraham v'Yaakov. Now he really jumps through this Gemara over here. He doesn't explain it, and it will be ambiguous if you just read it. So I'll explain the Gemara. The Gemara is Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Petet Amud Bet. There the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to Avraham Avinu when he wanted to destroy Am Yisrael. He said, I'm going to speak to their fathers, right? Take the fathers to PTA. So he goes to Avraham and says, Banecha chat'u. Your children sinned. They're in horrific situation. They're doing pretty bad stuff. Avodah Zarah, everything that you stood for, they stand for the opposite. Now you would imagine Avraham Avinu is chesed, right? Avraham is a hasid. No, Avraham says, Yimachu al kedushat shemecha. Destroy them. Finish them. Wipe them away. So Hashem says, okay, this guy, you know, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin that the zaken, muflag, is asur to be on part of Sanhedrin. According to one shita, if they don't have little kids, asur to be a dayan on the Sanhedrin for the din nefashot. Why? Because you're lacking a certain element of rachamim, right? When you've seen a lot in life and you're not dealing with little kids, a person changes. So Hashem says, I'm going to go to Yaakov. Yaakov was metupal bebanim, has a lot of children. It's more rahmanut. Goes to Yaakov, he says, these kids, it's bad. Look at what they're doing. And Yaakov says, really? Wipe them away. So Hashem says, Lo besavi is the Rahmanut is not in the older ones. Lo bedardeki, not in the younger ones. I'm going to go to Yitzchak. Now, he left Yitzchak for the end because it's the most unassuming, quiet. You never find Yitzchak Avinu talk even really. He's the most quiet. You see him with no personality of his own apparently. Even when he's digging wells, he's digging the wells that Avraham Avinu dug before it was filled with plishtim. He does not sound like an entrepreneur in any way, but surprisingly comes through in a tremendous, he becomes like the world's greatest negotiator. HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes to him, says the same thing, says, Banecha chat'u, your children have sinned. And all of a sudden, this quiet Yitzchak Avinu turns into a roaring lion. He says, Banai velo banecha? So you call them my children, not your children? It's like husbands and wife, whenever they do something good, the wife says, my children. Whenever they misbehave, it becomes his children. Right? So he said, wait a second, when they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, you said, Beni Bechori Yisrael. You called them your children. And now that they messed up, it become my children. It is both of our responsibilities. And he does a math. He says, let's see. In all the years of a person, this many years, he's a kid, and after a certain age, not doing any averot anymore. And between those ages also, like half of it, they're sleeping, right? So in sleeping, hopefully you're not doing any averot. And then, they're eating, they're going to bathrooms. Now, what's left already? Like a few hours a day. You take half, I take half, chazak u'baruch, right? So Gemara says, he negotiated our case. He lawyered our case in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he won. Because of Yitzchak Avinu. Now, because of that, the existence of the world, which is the Mishkan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu waits until the birthday of Yitzchak Avinu. All of a sudden, Yitzchak becomes the most significant personality of the entire Jewish history. We are here today sitting around the table because of Yitzchak Avinu, otherwise we would be wiped. Hashem asked Avraham Avinu, we love Avraham, Magen Avraham, Becha Chotmin, right? Yimachu al kedushat shemecha. Yaakov Avinu, Israel, שבך אתפאר, the בחיר שבאבות, ימחו על קדושת שמך. They both said we should be wiped. We're here because of Yitzchak Avinu. And that dedication is the element of avodah. Yitzchak Avinu, I'm going to deviate a little bit from what he says over here in the rest. It's a beautiful piece, but I want to deliver this point home. Yitzchak Avinu is the Av of avodah. Avraham is chesed. Yaakov is midat emet. And Yitzchak Avinu is the olat mima. He became a korban. He became the element of avodat Hashem. When you talk about the Mishkan, when you talk about the Mikdash, you cannot miss the role of one of our avot that became a korban himself. Efros savur umunach al gabei mizbeach. Akedat Yitzchak lezar'o hayom tizkor. The bracha that we say on Rosh Hashanah. We are calling upon that zchut even up to today. Here's the element of avodat Hashem. Mishkan, korbanot, all of that is for avodat Hashem. And Yitzchak Avinu is that dedication. And what's the element, what's the main take-home message of this? Is that, we don't have korbanot nowadays. And he deals with this at length in the second half of this piece, Ot Dalit, of how do we accomplish the kapara, the atonement of korbanot. Beshogeg, bemezid, he goes through all of that. What do you do when you don't have the Beit HaMikdash? But in reality, the core of the entire subject revolves around Yitzchak Avinu and his existence. He became a korban that was not nikrav. Yitzchak Avinu is the only korban that we call it as a korban, that its ashes is in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it was never killed. Why? Because even when you don't have the Beit HaMikdash, it seems to me, you have that power of accomplishing the same exact thing with your dedication to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you're ready to give up everything, when you are ready to be makriv, a korban, you don't have to die for it. You have to live. You could live for it. You could live for it. And sometimes it's harder to live for Kiddush Hashem than to die for Kiddush Hashem. It's a momentary thing. Like the Tosafot say this in Masechet Ketuvot, Taf Lamed Gimel, I believe it is. The Gemara says, if it was not because they threw Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah into the Kivshan Ha'esh, into the furnace, they would have, if they would have lashed them and tortured them, they would have bowed to the Tzelim. So Machloket, Tosafot, Rambam, if it was a real Avodah Zarah, wasn't a real Avodah Zarah. But sometimes harder to go through difficulties of life than making a momentary decision for Mesirut Nefesh Mamash. But that is exactly the element of our avodah. That regardless of whether or not you have the Mishkan, or you have the Beit HaMikdash, or maybe you don't have it, tefilot keneged temidin tiknum. Our tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a replacement of the korbanot that was brought in the Mikdash. And 3 times a day, every day. And a day such as today, 4 times a day, you have Rosh Chodesh. You stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and you dedicate yourself to Hashem, remembering the zchut of Yitzchak Avinu, the olat mima. Now you don't have to bring a korban in order to be a korban. But when you dedicate yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you become a replacement of the Mishkan and the Mikdash. And think about this. We just mentioned the Mishkan is a miniature universe. And we run it with korbanot. Nowadays, we run it with the tefillah. The tefillah is me'advarim ha'omdim berumo shel olam u'bnei adam mezalzelin bo, says the Gemara in Brachot. Krum zulud livnei adam. Tefillah is the highest thing that exists in the universe, says the Gemara, and because it's so readily available, we disgrace it. We come to the minyan, we daven up, as people say. Daven up, daven up. Oftentimes we step back and we're like, what did I say? We just remember stepping 3 steps forward and then next thing we remember, we were coming back. But in reality, this is the replacement of the Mishkan, of the entire element of the world and universe. And it's given in our hands to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You don't have to be a korban being shachted and burnt. But it could be like Yitzchak Avinu, the element because of which we exist. That he's called in Olat Temimah without being shechted. By a person dedicating their life. It doesn't have to be like Yitzchak Avinu. But whoever listens to this knows what element they still lacking from dedication. Dedication to kavanah in tefillah, dedication to a little learning more, to set times for kviyut etim la Torah. When a person decides, I'm going to dedicate myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it doesn't have to be 100%. But if it's 10%, it's going to be kavua. It's this 10%, it's not moving. If I'm adding another 5%, it's going to be a through and through 5%, not a wishy-washy 5%. It's an olat mimah, a complete korban. And drawing ourselves closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu really is the key to the existence and to the shefa of this world. Just like all the shefa came down from the existence of the Mishkan, as we discuss, all the shefa depends on our actions, especially our tefillah and connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, something to cherish, something to value in our lives. Be'ezrat Hashem for all of us. Amen.
Amen.